Growing up, I never imagined I would ever work in the computer industry. After all, computers weren't for normal people. They were for guys who had pencil holders in their shirt pockets and wore thick eyeglasses. But I ended up spending my career selling every level of technology from typewriters to computers, and every step of the way I had to fight and mostly lose to the dominant force in the industry, IBM. My first job in the tech industry was with Olivetti. I remember my first day at Olivetti. Tasked with selling typewriters and adding machines, my manager asked me if I had a territorial preference, and I said, I take anything except the garment district. He shook his head and smiled before telling me he was assigning me to work in the garment district. Lead generation is the lifeblood of any sales organization. In those days, we generated leads by knocking on doors. We always left the office about 10 o'clock to visit customers or to look for new ones. In those days, there wasn't tight building security. You could walk into any building and go to any office or any floor and ask to speak to the office manager or purchasing director. Usually it was a waste of time because IBM was the corporate standard everywhere, and a person's job was in jeopardy if they bought something else, and I was selling something else. My manager told me to avoid large offices with multiple floors and to concentrate on small businesses where I could speak directly to the owner. Working in the garment district, I often had to push through racks of dresses or shirts to see the owner, who was always looking to negotiate a deal, and I was always willing to give them one. When I was out in the field, I had to call the office at least twice a day to get my messages. Since there were no cell phones back then, I always knew quiet places with public phones to return customer calls. That meant making sure I had plenty of dimes in my pocket. It was part of my territorial intelligence to know where all the payphones and public bathrooms were. I also learned to look for Italian companies that were partial to Olivetti, especially customers looking to trade in their old typewriters or adding machines. After a tough day of knocking on doors and getting rejected multiple times, I'd return to the office to make more phone calls. When 5 o'clock rolled around, it was time to go out for drinks. Drinking was a lot cheaper in those days. You could buy a beer for $3 or a mixed drink for $6. Many happy hours included a free buffet and 2-for-1 drinks. For $10, I could eat dinner from the buffet and get 4 beers and 2 rum and cokes. When happy hour was over, depending on who I was hanging out with, it meant either a trip to the village and hanging out in a jazz club like the Village Vanguard, or heading uptown to Birdland to hear some of the younger cats. My other option was staying in Midtown to go dancing at clubs like the Underground or Studio 54. Looking back, I marvel at how things have changed. In 2023, doing business was very different from what it had been in the old days. I no longer had to go in the office to start my day because I worked from a home office. And instead of me knocking on doors to get my leads, I had young kids recruited out of college using LinkedIn to set up appointments for me. I was selling cloud services where there was no equipment to demonstrate. Instead of sitting at a typewriter or computer to demonstrate its capabilities, demos were done using PowerPoint presentations, and the customer never saw anything. When I went out to breakfast, the $1 egg, potato, toast, and coffee special I used to get was now costing $12.95, and it cost $5 just for the cup of coffee. The few times I did go into the office, we'd still go out for drinks after work, but that $3 beer now cost $9, and that $6 rum and coke was now called a Caribbean mood adjuster and carried a $16 price tag. The disco era had been over for decades, and there were few places to go dancing after work. After 4 decades of fighting against the odds and taking on the giants, I realized that the more things changed, the more they stayed the same. Instead of IBM monopolizing the industry, Amazon Web Services was now the big dog, and I was still on the outside looking in, working for Oracle. I wasn't surprised when potential customers told me their corporate standard for cloud providers was Amazon or Microsoft. Once again, I was fighting the giants and swimming upstream. But I knew that in New York, if I looked hard enough, there were always plenty of other customers looking to get a deal.